we've covered laughter. There's a lot more to it. I really think it's an important part of leadership. And you know what? We're on ideas here, which is the word in the acronym where I'm thinking more about creative thinking, which is obviously precedes innovation. And just to point out, of course, laughter, as I mentioned, and creativity are really closely connected. Actually, did you know that the same part of your brain lights up when you hear a joke as when you have a new idea? It integrates both spheres of your brain. And of course, a joke takes you down one particular path and the punchline takes you somewhere completely different, just like a new idea. They're really, really connected. So if you can get the laughter in place, the ideas will flow anyway. But here are some more ideas about ideas. Just in case you think I'm some kind of crazy guy that's thinking, oh, we've got to be funny and creative at work. I'm not alone. This is some really great research from a former client of mine, the World Economic Forum, covering the leaders of 30 million employees in 9 different industries. So really good research. They were asked what is the hierarchy of capabilities that you're seeing in the workplace, and they see creativity rising up that list. So creativity is more and more important. And why wouldn't it be? We're in disrupted times. You need new ideas to cope with new challenges. Okay, so how do you get into creativity? It can be one of those words that's really difficult to access. It's either for geniuses or artistic types. Not at all. We can all think creatively. And the thing that, to me, I think of it as the gateway drug to creativity, of course, is curiosity. Now, curiosity is inspirational for me because it's not fixed. We are, of course, born, we all have our kind of DNA in us, and so we will have a kind of a fixed level of curiosity, but then we can tweak it up and down depending on our environment and what we do. And there are 2 things you should remember. Neuroscientists say use it or lose it in terms of skills, and this is the same for curiosity. If you exercise your curiosity, it's like building your muscles. It will get greater and bigger, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it will go on. If you don't, I'm afraid it will fade away. The other thing is it's like a virus, actually. If you could surround yourself with curious people, you're much more likely to be curious. Think about it like the mercury in a thermometer. It rises and falls depending on the heat in the room, how much you're using your curiosity and how much you're connecting to curious people. Here are a few tips for you to try. I call this the 5-hour rule, but I take it I'm inspired by this man on the screen here, Bill Gates. He's a bit of an icon of executive learning because back when he was the chairman of Microsoft, he would take 2 weeks out a year just to read. And it was during those periods of reflection and curiosity that he had the ideas that drove this phenomenal success of Microsoft forward in the 90s and the early part of the century. We can't all be the chairman of the board, but maybe we can all find 5 hours in a week to do some kind of learning to get the fuel for creativity. So try that. Think about 5 hours, just reorganizing your week to find 5 hours where you could learn, watch a podcast, really just help yourself to develop. The other part is to recalibrate your radar, and this can work personally and for your team. How are you getting your new information? How are you crossing cognitive boundaries into new areas? Because that's how creativity happens, when an idea jumps the fence from one area to another. So who are the people you're meeting? What are the physical places you're going to? What groups are you part of? What podcasts do you listen to? What YouTube channels do you subscribe to? What magazines do you read? What websites do you regularly visit? What conferences do you go to? How are you doing that? Just have an audit and think, well, how can we reintroduce some new thinking into my life and into my team's life? The final one, and this is a really powerful technique, I think this is the thing that I really love to get talk about with leaders who visit London Business School. Think about changing your leadership. So instead of providing all the answers all of the time, instead you ask great questions. And by great questions, I really mean questions that are open. So how might we do this? What if we did it this way? Have you seen what the competition's doing? Have you seen what our clients are saying? These are questions that invite divergent thinking rather than a yes or no answer. I like to think of it as letting the fresh air into your team. That's part of your job. So have you seen this? Are we doing that? So you're encouraging a conversation. 2 more things on ideas. First, what is the great problem that your team is trying to solve? This is taken from the practice of great entrepreneurs. They're always finding a great problem. This is Sir James Dyson in the UK, who obviously focused on, I want to make the world's best vacuum cleaner, and since then, lots of different appliances. What's your problem? If you can find that and make sure your team has got a series of interesting problems that they are engaged with, that's hugely powerful. And finally, this is both a philosophy and a process. A fantastic way to get your ideas into the world and try them out at a lower risk. So instead of thinking constantly, getting out in the world and trying things, prototyping, just trying things out. This is taken from Silicon Valley and other innovation hotspots such as Shanghai in China. The idea of thinking big, but starting small and then learning fast from what happens. So I would encourage you to think about your ideas and design an experiment that's simple, small, safe, and fast, speedy. And just think, if you're trying to build a jetliner there, if that's your vision, what's the smallest viable first step? What I call a minimum viable experiment, a really powerful way to learn faster than your environment is changing. Okay, so I've given you some ideas on the ideas section. So again, you can pause your video here if you would like to. So write down how you might use the techniques that I've just mentioned to boost creative thinking for yourself and your team. So just to remind you, I talked about getting curious, everyday learning, that 5-hour rule, asking great questions. How could you ask more and better questions? Finding great problems, maybe that will spring something for you, or using an experimental approach. And by the way, each one of these, if you just kind of follow through maybe on my book or somebody else's book, there's lots of different ways you can get into this. They're big subjects in their own